Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from Pro Football Network. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, who is the quarterback for the Jets next season, and is he currently on their roster?
I don't think he's on their roster. My concern is that it's Aaron Rodgers.
You know, it would make too much sense.
Yeah, there's you've got all the LaFleur's there. Rodgers gets to peddle his stuff to a New York market, although probably will be a little bit quieter about 9/11 this time around. And then he would end up in Minnesota a year later.
Boy, you know, I hadn't thought about that angle of a potential Aaron Rodgers trade.
The he's Favre and he comes back to Minnesota angle, or the don't mention the conspiracy theory angle?
It's the Pete Carroll themed one, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's fair.
That's the question. Well, with that awkwardness, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. It's the holidays around here. You got the party going on in the background and with Arif. I'm drinking a little bit of Di Serono. We're gonna make this a holiday party of sorts. We've got a fun mailbag. We have a review, or rather preview, of the Giants game that will be happening on Christmas Eve. So stick around. We've got some fun for you. If you enjoy the show and would like to help support us financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and help us out there. You can get access to bonus material. You can get access to the Discord and other fun stuff we do over on Patreon. A special thank you to Bryden Lawson, who is our newest Patreon subscriber. Thank you, Bryden, so much. Again, patreon.com/NorseCode. The New Year's episode for the Patreon people will be the extra Christmas episode. Usually they end up getting at least one extra episode for the end of the year stuff. So expect that out around New Year's. Everybody else gets it on Monday. We are not going to be doing a regular show on Monday. We'll be putting out the Christmas episode. I am doing my best, hating the sound of my own voice, putting this thing together. So hope you guys enjoy it. There have been a couple of really funny moments that I had forgotten about. So we do have plenty of that, plenty of the B Corner, plenty of the baby witches to talk about. So enjoy that. But the Christmas episode will be coming out on Monday. Otherwise, if you'd like to help us, you can go over to paypal.me/NorseCode as well and donate. That's a one-time donation. Or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and be like Jesse from Brooklyn, who posted what the shower curtain looks like in person. And boy, is that just sharp. And it terrified Dropplay Dave, who drew the thing. That was my best. That was the best part. Was his reaction to that? Was, oh God, what have I done? I have become the destroyer of worlds, sort of thing. That was wonderful. I appreciated that.
Yeah, so. I mean, forcing creators to confront the realities of their own creations is something that we very much enjoy doing here on Norse Code.
That's been a staple of Norse Code. Longtime listeners know.
Yeah, for sure. If you've been around for a while, say since like episode 3, you would understand.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the cornerstones of this podcast is forcing people to deal with the situations that they have wrought.
Exactly.
I mean, I offered to apologize to Dropplay Dave by sending him more Arif socks, but he didn't seem to want them anymore. So
what? Why not? That's weird.
He's got a great dog toy in it, so he's good with that. So, but again, you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up shirts, baby onesies. We got throw pillows over there too, and of course the shower curtain, which is glorious and terrifying. So check it out again, norsecode.threadless.com. Let's get into the show, and let's go to an interview that Arif conducted earlier today that previews the Giants game with Weiss from New York Giants Daily.
All right, I'm here with Weiss from NYG Daily. I was just on their podcast, had a really fun discussion about the Giants and the Vikings there. How you doing, man?
Hey, how are you, Arif? Thank you for having me on.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, it's great to have somebody else from a team that is, you know, getting too lucky, super unsustainable. You can't trust them. If they make the playoffs, having kind of a meeting of the unsustainable teams here. But it seems like the teams are headed in other directions, right? The Vikings have found ways to keep winning. The Giants have stumbled a little bit over the last couple of games. How do you feel kind of about the direction of the team this season, and then just kind of overall, given who they have with like Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, Wink Martindale, and so on?
Yeah, I think entering the season, I don't think a lot of Giant fans, realistically expected this. And when I say this, I mean we're in Week 16 and the Giants have a clinching scenario for a playoff berth. And it's not a situation like in previous years where the NFC East is bad and you're winning, 6, 7, 8 games and you're in until the end. No, I mean I think you look at the NFC East, it's probably the best division in football, and with all four teams in the playoff, on three of them, in the playoffs right now. But I think with the Giants is, it's pretty obvious they don't have talent. This is year one of a rebuilding period. They have a lot of work to do. There's still uncertainties about the quarterback position, but they have just found ways to win games. And bringing in Brian Daboll, bringing in Joe Schoen, the number one thing that I think a lot of fans wanted when they moved off of Dave Gettleman and all that was, they wanted continuity. They wanted philosophical alignment between the head coach and the front office. And that's what they got. I mean, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll were in Buffalo. They, worked together for a long time. They, even dating back to their times in Miami when Schoen worked as a scout for the Dolphins and Daboll was the offensive coordinator. So they have that relationship that's dated back years and years. And you see that. I mean, they're philosophically aligned with their goal, and they were very disciplined this season. This season was all about, biting the bullet, cleaning up the cap situation, seeing what they have with some of the players, and then letting it play out. And that's what they did. I think they were very disciplined at the trade deadline, knowing that they're not a wide receiver away from being legitimate contenders to compete, and then just giving guys opportunity, putting guys in position where they can be successful, and the results are very positive.
Awesome. It is always kind of interesting when you encounter a situation like with the Vikings, like with the Giants, where a team is exceeding expectations, and you're told kind of, well, the degree to which they're exceeding kind of what they're capable of tells you that it's not going to be something that lasts, and you're in this awkward spot where you're really happy that the team is doing well, you're really happy with the direction of the team, certainly you're comfortable with the staff in place, but at the same time you kind of have to keep on telling people it's not going to keep on lasting like this. They're not quite this good yet. Does it feel kind of weird having that tension between celebrating how far they've clearly come and trying to remind people that, like, hey, they're kind of due for a disappointment in a second, just brace yourself?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I entered the season, my mentality was it really doesn't matter what happens this season because prior Giant coaches, typically year one was positive and it all started to fall apart in year two. So you don't want to get too high, you don't want to get too low. But, there's just something about Brian Daboll and what he's done. And I think a lot of it, like I said, is because of the philosophical alignment with the general manager where like they're all on the same page. It really sort of it's promising if you're a Giant fan. You really think that they finally figured it out now. But yeah, I mean, look, when they were 6-1, 7-2, and it was the NFL trade deadline, and everyone is like, get a receiver, because of the state of the Giant receiving core, and then on top of the fact that they traded away Kadarius Toney, who was supposed to be that quote unquote wide receiver one, and Kenny Galladay has just been, probably the worst free agent signing in Giant history. The fact that they were able to stay disciplined, I think that sort of was like, okay, what they're doing is great. The record is great. The results are great. But this is about long-term versus short-term. And you can't let sort of short-term accomplishments impact long-term gain. And if you look at sort of the trade deadline and what happened, and I keep harping on that because that was the big thing when answering your question in terms of like living in the moment is like people were like, hey, if we get a receiver, we can do this. Well, it's like, what is this? This trading a second round pick for Jerry Jeudy, what does that make the Giants? What does the addition of Jerry Jeudy do to the Giants? Does it put them in that conversation with the NFC elites? I don't think so. But at the same time, it's like, well, you never know. I mean, this is, the NFL. Anything can happen. Well, yeah, that's true. But, any decision you make, I think you have to look at short-term success versus long-term success. And I just didn't think it ever made sense for them to make a move. And I think the organization staying disciplined really, I think, shows that they understand how far away they really are from continuation of continued success, not just, a season where you're quote unquote going all in.
Right. Like it is unlikely that Jerry Jeudy is the difference between, having a ring and not having a ring. And so the question is, maybe you want to buy a win or two this season at the cost of maybe 2 or 3 wins in subsequent seasons. That's really tough. Let's talk about that receiver core, though. I mean,
Sure.
I think that's been I think it might be the worst receiver core in the league, right? Which is kind of what inspired a lot of these conversations. I mean, I like Richie James, I like Darius Slayton, but they certainly don't seem like players that should be kind of wide receiver ones. Can you tell me a little bit more about the state of this receiver league, whether or not we'll see Wan'Dale Robinson in this game, what we should expect from him if we do, kind of how you expect the Vikings to handle, or not the Vikings, sorry, the Giants to handle receiver going forward?
So when you look at the receiving core, you really have to go back to the offseason. And when you look at how they started with the, perception that, okay, it's going to be Kadarius Toney and it's going to be Kenny Golladay and it's going to be Sterling Shepard. And then they drafted Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round. Well, Kadarius Toney from the start really never, built that trust with the coaching staff, and you sort of saw him fall, not getting the reps early on in the season. Kenny Golladay, the only thing you can say about him is that he made it through training camp without any injury, and then entering the season just, never took advantage of the reps, and he was buried. The one guy that sort of their quote unquote wide receiver one right now, Darius Slayton, well, he was actually buried in the depth chart in training camp, and he was not expected to even be on the roster. We all expected him to be traded during the 53-man cuts. Well, as it turns out, he's now their wide receiver one, and he's played particularly well. I mean, Darius Slayton is not, he's not Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen, or, he's not a big name, big guy receiver, but he's a quality receiver. And the most important thing is he's built a good relationship with Daniel Jones over the years. I think Daniel Jones, when he's had success, has been throwing to Darius Slayton. And then you look at guys like Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins. Isaiah Hodgins got here in November, and he's now their wide receiver too. I mean, it just shows how depleted they are. And Kenny Golladay, he just doesn't play. I think he played 2 snaps versus Washington. We've gone past the whole, is Kenny Golladay ever going to score a touchdown for the Giants, to now it's like, is he ever going to catch another ball? Like, he just doesn't play. And given his salary cap, I mean, it was such a horrible signing, and it's just been so bad ever since. And they've given Golladay multiple opportunities. And then, the one guy that was sort of coming on, Wan'Dale Robinson, the second round pick, sort of a guy that you saw, that you looked at and said, okay, they have a role for him in this offense, even though he was an undersized receiver. He tore his ACL against the Lions, and so he's out for the year. Sterling Shepard tore his ACL; he's out for the year. They flirted with a potential Odell Beckham reunion, but now that the fact that there's doubt of him being ready for the playoffs, that ended that conversation. So looking into this game, obviously, look, the Giants' passing offense is not. It's tough. I think they're the bottom 5 in terms of passing yards per game. A lot of what they do is underneath. They don't take a lot of shots. They beat Washington last week, not throwing a ball over 15 yards. A lot of what they do is just the short intermediate stuff, and it's not because of lack of trust in just the quarterback. I think it's a combination of things, and a big part of it's because the receivers it's just not a good receiver room. And Richie James, I sort of look at it as the Richie James experience. I thought he had a good game against Washington, but he's had some really bad moments throughout the year, especially in the Seattle game where he fumbled twice on kick returns.
Jeez, yeah, that's pretty rough. I mean, you mentioned that there could be, that the reason for the lack of a downfield passing game is not the lack of a trust in the quarterback, but that is a pretty open question, right?
Right.
What to do with the quarterback. You asked me kind of what you do with Daniel Jones, and I kind of floundered for a bit. I don't actually know what to do with Daniel Jones, and so I figured franchising him, but yeah, okay, there's a discussion about what to do with the future of Daniel Jones, whether or not you can trust where he is right now. But, for the purposes of evaluating this game and how they're going to do for this season, what do you think of what Daniel Jones is as a quarterback, and kind of not necessarily where he's going to go, but what are the best opportunities to take advantage of what he does well?
So I think with Daniel Jones, obviously the first thing that jumps out to you is that he's been able to do everything that they've asked him to do so far. And against Washington, he executed that game plan really, really well. He played a very professional game. It was a game that you came away saying, okay, he didn't have a big statistical game. I mean, I think he threw for under 100 yards. But if you go back and watch that game, and I by no means am like a Daniel Jones apologist or truth or anything like that. I'm fully aware of his limitations, but when you go back and watch that Washington game, and it was a big game for him for his career. I mean, the primetime record is well documented, but he's not played well in these big games. He hasn't played in many, but the ones that he did play in, he didn't necessarily play well. Well, what he did in this game was he made a lot of tight window throws. A lot of his completions, a lot of the big plays that he made were either off script plays or he was making throws into tight windows to Richie James and to Isaiah Hodgins, and he was a big, that 18 play 97-yard drive, which is actually 102 yards because they had a 5-yard penalty on that drive. I mean, he made really smart decisions. And look, they're very limited offensively. Not just that receiver, their interior, their offensive line struggles in pass protection. Evan Neal struggled in pass protection in that game. So he was pressured, but he consistently made the throws. He did what they asked him to do. And so that sort of gives you hope looking at long term. Like, okay, what do you do with Daniel Jones? Well, that question, I think there's still more evidence to collect. There's still 3 more regular season games, potentially a playoff game. But I think what Daniel Jones has showed me, and I came into the season thinking that this was going to be his final year, but what he showed me is that, okay, Daniel Jones is never going to be an elite quarterback. He's never going to be in that conversation with those, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson. He's never going to be that. But he deserves the opportunity to show what kind of quarterback he's going to be with a respectable supporting cast, with a real wide receiver one. He's never had a real wide receiver one. If you look at his career, the best receiver he's played with is probably Golden Tate or Sterling Shepard. And even that, Sterling Shepard was injured a couple seasons.
Right.
So it's really been Golden Tate. And so it begs the question, like, hey, if you can get him a wide receiver one, if you can, just hypothetically speaking, if you can go in the offseason and trade for a DJ Moore and draft another receiver, and then all of a sudden you put a respectable supporting cast around him, like, what does it do? I spoke about this, earlier in the week with somebody. I said, what Daniel Jones has shown this season is that his floor is a lot higher than we thought. The next question is, okay, if you can build a supporting cast around him, does that raise his ceiling? And what his ultimate ceiling can be? And I think that's the question that I think Daniel Jones has deserved to be asked, if that makes sense, this season. And so that's what's ultimately going to be the deciding factor. And I think a franchise tag is where this whole situation is headed.
You mentioned something about giving him a chance. I think a lot of that has to do with the offensive line. You mentioned that Evan Neal had a pretty bad game. I'm taking a look at this offensive line. It's outside of Andrew Thomas, who I think is probably a pretty underrated tackle. The rest of this group is pretty bad. I think that, someone like John Feliciano, I think you might have been able to expect that. I know that Bills fans have been kind of annoyed with how he's played, but Mark Glowinski, I expect a little bit more from. Evan Neal, I mean, I trust that he's going to get better, but he's not necessarily playing all that well right now. What is going on with this offensive line group? What is kind of the issue? Are there particular types of pass rushers or run stoppers that fit a particular prototype that are better against them, or is there just kind of everybody kind of has a field day? What's kind of the issue here?
So I think when you look at their offensive line, I think the interior is very good run blockers. I think, and then their offensive line as a whole, I think, are very good, against blocking for the run. I think the issue with the pass protection is you have to look at it on an individual basis. Evan Neal, particularly, is in terms of his pass set. If you look at his tape from Alabama, he had a vertical pass set, and that's where he was able to sort of use his strength to hold off those edge rushers. They've sort of changed that a little bit this season with the way his stance and how he uses his feet and then his punch. But then they said, okay, we're going to go back to what you are comfortable with at Alabama. What then happened was, okay, he started to settle down. And look, rookies, they're going to struggle. I mean, Christian Darrisaw struggled. Andrew Thomas struggled. These guys are going to struggle in their first year. But then what changed was, okay, they went back to what he was comfortable with. Then he got an MCL injury and missed a month. So then he came back, and his first game back is against the Dallas Cowboys, and we all saw what happened in week 3. And, coming off an MCL injury, it's, you need a week or two. So he struggled, and on top of the fact of being a rookie, the interior of the offensive line, they're just flat out not good. I mean, John Feliciano is not good. He's just simply not a good pass blocker. I mean, I think, Bills fans, when they signed him, they said, even though he played guard, they think he can be a better center, but he's not. He's a below average center. He pass blocking, he struggles with those big interior guys that sort of are fast with their hands that can get, can move him. And then, left guard has sort of been a turnstile once again. They had Shane Lemieux. He had a toe injury. Ben Bredesen, who might be their best option at left guard, he got injured. Josh Azudu, their third-round rookie, just as soon as he started to settle down and get more reps, because I think a lot of rookies, they need these reps to get them, to get educated on how to play in the NFL. He got hurt, and so it's sort of been a turnstile there. And then Nick Gates, who, remarkable story coming back, we always knew he's more comfortable at center than guard. And the one game he actually played center, he was better than John Feliciano, but for some reason the coaching staff feels like Feliciano is their center. And so now Gates sort of rotates with Bredesen at left guard, and then at right guard, Glowinski. It's a whiff signing. You looked at him out of Indianapolis, and he just did, in terms of pass blocking, he was, he brought continuity there, and we thought, okay, given the fact that they were so limited with their salary cap situation, getting a guy like Glowinski, you would think, okay, this is going to bring some sort of stability to your interior offensive line. Well, he's been a liability too. I think in pass blocking, he's, the way he uses his hands, his feet are slow. It's just not been. I think when I watch offensive linemen, especially the interior guys, I always look at their hand placement because all of them are strong, right? Like they're all strong physical guys, but mainly it's like, okay, where are your hands? Are you in a position where you can, get a hold of the defensive lineman and keep him from sort of pushing you out of the way? And I think Glowinski struggled there. I think a lot of it is not injury related. I just think he's just not been good.
All right. That is a tough referendum on who they are.
Yeah.
It's pretty fair given what we've seen.
It's still a work in progress. There's still a lot of work to do with their offensive line. And you'll hear me say that a lot with a lot of these positions. It's a work in progress.
Well, one area where I think that they have progressed is that tight end position. I thought it was, heading into the season, kind of a weakness. They drafted a 4th-round rookie. I didn't actually think the world of him. I didn't think that he was picked wrong or incorrect or anything like that. It was just not a strong tight end class, so picking a guy in the middle rounds didn't seem all that exciting to me. But Daniel Bellinger over the past couple of weeks seemingly has come on. That's been really important because the Giants, especially at the beginning of the season, were playing a lot of extra tight ends. How is this tight end group looking to you now versus kind of where it was at the beginning of the season?
I mean, it starts with Daniel Bellinger. One theory that I have, and I don't know if you agree with this, is that it's tough for tight ends to come in and be instant impactful guys. Even the all-time greats, Gronkowski, Kelsey, even if you go back to Tony Gonzalez, their rookie seasons were not something to write home about, right? Bellinger came in, there was a lot on his plate. One of the things I spoke about was that, hey, I think the Giants need to bring in a veteran tight end for camp. They didn't have one. They had Jordan Atkins, but he didn't. He just kept dropping throughout on the depth chart throughout camp. But Daniel Bellinger, they just kept putting things on his plate, and he didn't look overwhelmed. And it was like you went into the season, he was a tight end 1. And look, Bellinger is not a guy that does. Where you look at, he's not an eye-popping player. It's like, wow, look how in terms he can run routes or he can catch the ball. But he just does a lot of things good. He's a very good blocker, which is surprising. and he can do those simple, tight end leak plays, and he'll catch the ball, and he'll get yards. He's a high volume player in terms of, they ask a lot of him, and he doesn't look overwhelmed. Unfortunately, what impacted his rookie season was the fact that he got poked in the eye against Jacksonville and suffered a really serious eye injury. I don't know if you guys remember, but he had blood dripping down from his eye as he left the field, and he missed some time. And look, when rookies miss time, it's tough. And then because the Giants are so depleted offensively, they were so reliant on Bellinger, not just in the passing game, but in the run blocking as well. And when he was out, they had guys like Chris Myrick coming in, and then they picked up Lawrence Cager from the Jets practice squad. So it's been a lot of just bargain bin guys to go along with a rookie 4th-round pick. And so far, the early returns on Bellinger are very, very promising. Now it's just about, okay, is there more to him, or is this just who he is?
Oh, that's fair. Yeah. I remember, when George Kittle was being talked up in his second year, a lot of people were like, hey, I know that he didn't have the greatest rookie season or anything like that. And I was like, I was really impressed with his rookie season. Go back, he had like 500 yards, right? Which is like, for a modern tight end, is not as much. Like, it's no Mark Andrews 1,000 yards, Travis Kelce getting 1,400 yards, or anything like that, right? So, I mean, that's just kind of the nature of rookie tight ends. It's one of the most difficult positions to learn. Well, let's finish the offense with a discussion of probably the position that everyone's fairly happy with, the running back position. I don't know if you're happy with the investment they made in 2018 to get Saquon Barkley, but certainly he's fun to watch. I believe he was called a whirling dervish on the last broadcast. Yeah. And that's actually not a bad way to describe kind of the way that he plays. What does Saquon Barkley bring to the offense? How critical is it that you have a running back at the caliber of Barkley versus maybe an investment at receiver or something like that? What's kind of the book on him right now?
So the book on Saquon Barkley, I think, is two separate books. I think it's sure. Number one, the investment and the learning experience from that. Obviously the debate about taking a running back at 2, clearly a mistake by the Giants. You just don't do it. You don't draft a running back that high, especially when you're in a position that the Giants were in. But if you look at his career as in the last 5 years, he has had the ACL injuries, and he's had other, ankle sprains that he's missed time, and that's common for running back. This is why you don't draft a running back that high, is because what happens to him, the wear and tear, and we saw it with Barkley. But this year, what you saw from Saquon was you saw him step into more of a leadership role, really lead by example. And he is, like, aside from the pick and where he was drafted, Saquon Barkley is a great player in this league. He can do multiple things. The one weakness that Saquon had, where you could point to and say that's his weakness, was his ability to pass block. He has become a great blocking running back to the point where they don't use him much out of the passing game because they need his blocking ability, right? Because their offensive line is so struggles with pass protection. So he got better at that. I mean, he's everything for this Giants offense. Early in the season, they rode Barkley as much as they could. The Texan game, he had, I think, 35 touches. He's, through the first, I think, 10, 11 weeks of the season, he had the most touches by any running back by far. I mean, he is their offense, and it's partially because they don't have anybody else. So if you want to beat the Giants, it starts and really ends with Saquon Barkley. If you can shut down their running game and you can limit the times that they get the ball to Saquon Barkley, and you basically say, hey, Daniel Jones, beat us with that pass protection that you have and those receivers that you have, and if you do, we'll shake your hand. That's essentially what you got to do if you want to beat the Giants. Don't let Barkley pick up, not necessarily those big plays like those 40, 50-yard runs. It's more so don't let him allow the Giants to get in 2nd and 5 or 3rd and 2, or 2nd and 3. Don't allow them to get, positive plays to keep them on script. I think if you can limit the amount of times Barkley gets those 5 or 6 yard runs, you can live with that one big play that he has. You know what I mean? Like, he'll have 20 carries for, 80 yards, but like 50 will come on one play. You'll live with that. You just don't want Barkley to have those games where he's got 20 touches, averaging 5 yards a carry. But in terms of his future, I think mean, at this point, you got to look at what you have. If you don't have Saquon, what do you have? You're just creating another
Right.
big hole. And I know paying a running back, and I know all that conversation, but I sort of look at it on a case by case basis. If you're bringing Daniel Jones back, or you're not bringing Daniel Jones back, if you're bringing in a rookie quarterback, or if you're bringing in a veteran guy, you're gonna need skilled players. And I think they just can't afford to let Saquon Barkley walk out the door. It'll just create another massive hole, and I just don't see that happening.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I mean that'd be really tough. That's just such an interesting situation to approach.
Yeah, it is. I mean, what do you do? I mean, because the evidence is there. You don't want to pay a running back,
right,
top dollar.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like if he walks out the door, I mean, what Matt Breida's my running back one, Gary Brightwell's my running back one. I can't it's
that
it's tough.
in the free agency market for a receiver is garbage
exactly.
right now.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can use that money really conveniently, and obviously you want to preserve your draft picks in a trade. So that is a really difficult situation. Let's talk about kind of the other side of the ball. I think the highlight as a position group is probably this defensive line. We just talked about it in your podcast a little bit. Thibodeau has come on over the past couple of weeks. Obviously, statistically, last week was fantastic for him, but you mentioned that he'd been in the backfield a bunch of times. Azeez Ojulari, when healthy, can be kind of a difference maker. I think we're all fairly familiar with what Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence can provide up the middle. I know that Leonard Williams is somebody that you'll see him high on the PFF rankings, and people are just kind of wondering, why? What's going on? I haven't seen him make a bunch of plays. So this is kind of an interesting group, but overall, it is a very talented group. Can you tell me about it?
I mean, the Giants' defensive line puts a big smile on my face. If you know Giant history, you know the Super Bowls
going
they
back,
won.
Going back. Yeah.
All the Super Bowls they've won, they've always been about getting to the quarterback, their pass rush. The days of Osi Umenyiora, Justin Tuck, Michael Strahan, Matthias Kiwanuka, even going back to when they had Leonard Marshall and Lawrence Taylor before my time. But this is Giant football. When you're able to get to the quarterback, that's where it starts and that's where it ends for them. And I think finally the Giants went back to their roots and said, okay, we need pass rushers. It started with Azeez Ojulari 2 years ago. I thought Azeez was one of my favorite guys watching out of Georgia. The reason I thought he fell out of the first round was because of injury concerns. He had a great rookie season, dealt with a calf injury throughout the summer this year, and then missed some time, and then re-aggravated that calf injury and during the middle of the season, missed some more time. But since he's come back, the Giants are second in the league in sacks, behind only the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they've had 12 sacks over the last 3 weeks. And Azeez coming back, I'm a huge Azeez Ojulari fan. I think edge rushers that have that type of bend that he has, he is a very fun player. I have really high aspirations for him. And then Kayvon Thibodeau. When they drafted him, when I was watching him, I said, he's probably the best pass rusher in this class. I thought him and Aiden Hutchinson were very close. I stand by that statement. He is just... He's always been getting close, and there's always been moments where you're like, he's coming. And I thought it just came together. And for him to have that game on that night against that team with what was at stake for the Giants, it is massive. It is huge. He was a game wrecker. He was a game changer. Kayvon Thibodeau, I think, this is who he's going to be for the Giants. And, people talk about personality and this and that. Every Giants pass rusher, from Justin Tuck to OC to Michael Strahan, who we see on TV, they all have personalities. That's what they are. Lawrence Taylor had a personality. So Giant fans are used to pass rushers with this type of personality like Kayvon. Kayvon is a game wrecker. We love him. You look at their interior, their defensive line, and Dexter Lawrence. When Dexter Lawrence was drafted in 2017, my immediate thought was, okay, this is a two-down player. You're drafting him in the first round. I mean, this is a passing league. And then throughout his career, the first couple of years, you didn't see. He was a good player, good against the run, freak athlete for his size, but you never saw the pass rush. Then Andre Patterson, who we talked about on my show, joined the Giants. And all of a sudden, Dexter Lawrence now, in my opinion, has entered that conversation with Chris Jones and Jeffrey Simmons, and Aaron Donald of he is a legitimate all pro level defensive linemen. And I think when you talk about, those elite guys, those elite defensive linemen, Dexter Lawrence is one of those guys. He is really, his athleticism shows when he's able to get into the backfield and chase down these quarterbacks or chase down these running backs. And, he's sort of made Leonard Williams expandable. Leonard Williams was their best pass rusher last year. But now with the emergence of Dexter Lawrence, it makes you believe, like, do I need Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence? I mean, I'd love to have them both, but there's a salary cap, and Leonard Williams is set to have a $30 million cap hit next year. So in regards to this game, I think if the Giants are going to win this game against the Vikings, they're going to have to get to Kirk Cousins, and I think they have the horses that can do that.
Be an interesting matchup. Do you know if Ojulari and Thibodeau switch off on sides, or they play right side, left side?
They switch. The one thing about Wink Martindale's defense, and this is not just the defense line, is there's a lot of positionless football.
Right. Yeah.
You'll see Dexter Lawrence on the edge. You'll see Leonard Williams on the edge. You'll see Kayvon Thibodeau line up at linebacker. You'll see Azeez Ojulari line up at linebacker. They move guys around. They like to blitz. They like that's Wink's go-to. He likes to blitz. Although now with their front four generating the pressure, he's cut back on a lot of the blitzing. But yeah, they move guys around. What they like to do is they like to confuse the quarterback at the line of scrimmage and then see if he can figure them out. And they've had that's a lot of where they've had their success. But they move guys around all over the field. You'll see Kayvon Thibodeau line up at linebacker in this game. I can assure you that.
Do you know? Because I remember the Ravens just kind of let him go. It wasn't even like a contract expiring thing. Do you know why that happened?
I think it was just a situation. So I live in the Maryland area. I'm familiar with the Ravens. So it was just time for a change. That's sort of what the Ravens said. That's sort of what Wink said. It was, it just, sometimes things run its course and you just have to go in a different direction. I thought the Ravens had, somebody ready to take over the reins. And, Wink at that point realized that, he's sort of capped out with Baltimore, and it was just time for something else. And I also think another reason is, Wink he's getting up there in age, and I think he has aspirations of becoming a head coach one day. And he realized that if he is going to get a head coaching job, he's going to have to show that he could have success somewhere else. And even though statistically speaking, the Giants defense hasn't been statistically great, given the issues that they've had on defense and the lack of talent, he's done a phenomenal job. So I wouldn't be surprised if a team doesn't, interview Wink Martindale for a head coaching job. He's gotten head coaching interviews in the past, but I think that played a big role in this as well.
I mean, we talked a little bit about kind of that lack of talent, mostly in the secondary, but I did want to talk a little bit about linebacker, right?
Oof.
So I'm sorry. They've got I want to say Jalen Smith, and is it Micah McFadden? Is he starting?
Yeah, so Micah McFadden, the rookie 6th-round pick, is starting by default.
Yeah, that's rough. I know they've got former Gopher Carter Coughlin. It's okay if you insult him. He was always put in a bad position, being forced to play linebacker, then linebacker, then edge in college. I don't know if he was ever prepared to play a role in the NFL. Love what he did with the Gophers, but it sounds like he is not living it up as an off-ball linebacker.
No, I wouldn't say he's not living. I mean, he's a good special teams player.
He was always going to be one. 230 runs like that. Yeah, but it has been tough to find him a position. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of that linebacker group in general?
So they have 4 real, natural linebackers on their roster. They have Micah McFadden, Jalen Smith, Cam Brown, and Carter Coughlin. Cam Brown and Carter Coughlin really don't play defensive snaps. They're mainly special teams guys. Cam Brown's a really good special teams player, and Carter Coughlin too. In terms of Carter Coughlin himself, there have been times where they try to put him at edge a lot in the preseason. They really try to find him a role, and they just can't do it. So he's been limited to special teams. But Michael McFadden's a rookie, playing by default. I mean, at times he just looks overwhelmed. Jalen Smith just looks like a finished football player. Like you see him run, and then and who he's chasing, it just seems like he's not capable of playing anymore. And it's sad because Jalen Smith was a great college player, and in that conversation at that time where he was going to be a number 1 and number 2 overall pick, but It's tough to watch Jalen Smith play in 2022. We talk about positionless football with the Giants. Two guys that are essentially safeties, but they're playing linebackers are Tony Jefferson and Landon Collins. Landon Collins was called up from the practice squad last week against Washington, and he had some really good plays. I think he's sort of accepted that he's a linebacker now at this stage of his career, and he's now been called up to the 53-man roster. He gives the Giants speed. Where he's going to struggle is obviously in coverage. But at that line of scrimmage, a guy that can blitz, a guy that can get around the edge, a guy that can, play well against the run, chase down these backs. I think he's going to offer the Giants speed that they're really lacking at the linebacker position. And the same can be said for Tony Jefferson, too. Very physical player. But in terms of just their natural linebackers, they have two that they really play, and I don't think you're going to see a lot of them on the field much because of the fact that they're going to need speed going against the Vikings.
Well, that makes sense. It's really interesting the way you talk about those former safeties at linebacker. That does deplete the safety room a little bit, but I don't know by how much. The question, I think, for the Giants primarily defensively is that secondary. You don't have Adoree Jackson. You don't have Xavier McKinney. You're stuck with Julian Love, who I actually liked coming out. I don't know if he's playing corner or safety. You've got Fabian Moreau. You've got Darnay Holmes. I know there's a third-round pick from LSU. Can you tell me a little bit about what this secondary is providing for the Giants at this point?
Yeah, so to discuss the Giants' 2022 secondary, you have to really go back to the offseason. They had James Bradberry last year, and a lot of people that don't know the situation say, how can the Giants cut James Bradberry? Well, their salary cap situation was so bad that they just had no choice. He was literally the only guy that they could cut to free up significant cap space, and they tried to trade him up until the 12th hour, and they couldn't get a deal done primarily because he couldn't agree on a contract extension with some of the teams that were trading for him. There were teams that were willing to give up capital for James Bradberry, but they needed sort of a long-term commitment. Well, they didn't get it, so they had to move off of James Bradberry. That immediately killed their secondary. And then entering the season, if you were to ask me, hey, give me 5 guys that are indispensable for this Giant team, well, 2 of them are in their secondary, Adoree Jackson and Xavier McKinney. Well, what happened? Xavier McKinney hurts his knee returning a punt. He's out for 4 to 6 weeks. Xavier McKinney, during the bye week, injures his hand on an ATV, and I think it was in Cabo, and he's out indefinitely. We'll see. There's doubts he can even return this season, but we'll see. So, and then Adoree got hurt. The timing of Adoree's injury was so bad because it was a stretch of games where they're going against CeeDee Lamb, the Eagles receivers of A.J. Brown and Donovan and Devontae Smith, and then Washington, who has Terry McLaurin, and then here is Justin Jefferson, the best receiver in the league. So that stretch of games, you don't have your best corner. Well, what's left? Well, you got Fabian Moreau. Fabian Moreau got here in the middle of the season. He wasn't even with this team during training camp. Well, what else is there? Well, you got Nick McCloud. Nick McCloud got here, I think, October. He wasn't with the Giants during their training camp. And then the third-round pick, Cordell Flott. One thing about the Giants, and you've heard me say this a lot with their rookies, is all of them have missed time throughout the season during injury. And Cordell Flott is a promising young rookie, more suited for the slot, but they're asking a lot of him too. And then they got Rodarius Williams and the safeties. They got Dane Belton, another rookie, Jason Pinnock, and Julian Love. Julian Love is a really good player, and he's a guy that I think is going to get a long-term deal with the Giants. He's, I really thought that he was having. Now I know he is, but he was having just as good of a season as Xavier McKinney, and he fit really well into that positionless Wink Martindale defense. But their secondary is just it's beat up, and that's why so much is on this defensive line in this game. Didn't Justin Jefferson break the single game, or was close to breaking the single game receiving record? I think against Buffalo.
Single game Vikings receiver record. He didn't quite get to 300 yards, so.
Well, I think if the Giants don't get to the quarterback, and I'm not just saying this, but if they don't get to the quarterback, I think Justin Jefferson has a legitimate shot of going north of 200. Look, Fabian Moreau, Cordell Flott, Nick McCloud, Rodarius Williams. Tell me out of those 4.
That's not a bad point that you're making. It's just a lot to predict.
Give me one of those corners that you can look at and say, oh yeah, he's all right. Like he can play. Fabian Moreau, to his credit, Fabian Moreau has been a good in-season signing. Right? They've had to go bargain bin shopping.
Yeah.
He's been stable. They had Aaron Robinson at the beginning of the season, who was a third-round pick a few years ago, but he went on IR. And even when he was playing, he wasn't necessarily playing well. And then Adori's out, so it's like they don't have guys in their secondary that can, cover KJ Osborne, let alone Justin Jefferson. There's nobody can. I'm not saying that they. If you want to beat the Giants, cover their front four. It's a tough task, but if you can block their front four, you're going to have success. When Washington was able to protect Taylor Heineke, and I think Kirk is a lot better than Taylor Heineke, but when they were able to protect Taylor Heineke, he was able to find those receivers. Washington has good receivers. Minnesota has good receivers. So I think that's where the Vikings can, or I think will, sort of separate themselves from the Giants in this game, is the fact that they have weapons and a capable quarterback that can make throws. So it's tough sledding for the Giants. It's been a remarkable season given what they've gone through, but it's tough. And their nickel corner, Darnay Holmes, who had that great pass breakup at the end of the game against Curtis Samuel in Washington. Very clean play, by the way, too. Definitely not pass interference. He's struggled as well this season too. So it's tough sledding, man. It's tough sledding.
How many penalties has he incurred?
A lot. But that one against Washington wasn't a
penalty. but not. Yeah, obviously not.
He got really torched against CeeDee Lamb when they put CeeDee Lamb in the slot on Thanksgiving. They took advantage. So I do expect. I don't know how often the Vikings move Justin Jefferson around, but I think there's many ways they can attack with Jefferson. But I think putting him in the slot, going against Darnay Holmes, it's going to be that's where I think he can do the most damage. Or will do the most damage.
They have moved him in the slot sometimes and have had games where he's played a majority of his games in the slot, so he can move around. Obviously, he played a bunch of the slot in college. That was basically his entire final year of college was in the slot, so it's something he's very comfortable with. But he's such a good X receiver that they just kind of like him,
special
lining up 1-on-1. Yeah. So
there are very, very few those special players that are not quarterbacks that come around. Defensively, you get Aaron Donald and Micah Parsons, and offensively, I mean, Justin Jefferson. Like I look at Justin Jefferson, I say to myself, best non-quarterback right now player, and I would say, it's tough to go against Justin Jefferson right now. I love pass rushers, but just what he's able to do, it's. Yeah, I don't see receivers carry a team as much as he's carrying the Vikings, in my opinion.
Yeah, which is why they're typically held out of the MVP race. Which I would love for that to change. It's not going to, but
I don't see why he's not in the MVP conversation.
He just flat out is not. I mean, we just defaulted to quarterbacks, even though he could break 2,000. Right? He's on. He's not on pace, but I think if he averages like 126 yards.
That's the frustrating thing, is because everyone will tell you he's far and away the offensive player of the year. Well, okay. Well, then
but then why not? Yeah. No, I get it.
What does he need to do to be an MVP? What more do you want him to do? He's won games for the Vikings. He's made winning plays. What else does Justin Jefferson need to? He has the numbers. Like, what else does he need to do?
Dude, I'm right here with you, man. I think the MVP award is cracked. I think Jefferson's up there.
They're 11-3
in the NFL. Yeah,
and everyone tells me they're 11-3 because not because of their quarterback. Well, because of who?
Because of JJ. Yeah.
So it's like
I don't know. Maybe he can muscle his way to the conversation if he gets that 300-yard game.
And listen, I'm somebody that thinks Kirk Cousins deserves an honorable mention too. I think you can't. Yeah. I think he's been better, but the fact that Justin Jefferson is not in that conversation, it's mind-boggling. And then the same for Nick Bosa. I was telling you, Nick Bosa deserves to be in the MVP conversation too. What San Francisco has been through, it just can't be a quarterback every single year.
This is something I was ranting about this actually in our last episode. Me too. This is something I feel very strongly about, that we should be able to open up.
This is the year that you can give it to a non-quarterback.
With down quarterback years and a down offense in general, you'd think, hey, maybe we could award it to the top pass rusher or the top receiver or something, just something, man. But
they have the case. I mean, Nick Bosa is the best player on the best defense in the NFL on a team that's gone through three quarterbacks? right?
Oh yeah, and
So
to
it's
be the best player on a defense that also has somebody that is the best player at their position, and Fred Warner, like
yes,
to be better than that's a lot, right? So
right.
it is very frustrating that they don't even get to have contact with this conversation. So yeah,
Yep.
we're absolutely on the same page here. Um, yeah, I don't think there's anything with special teams we necessarily need to cover unless there's
No.
something like that really stands out to you that needs to be kind of
Only thing
um,
is Graham Gano should have made the Pro Bowl.
yeah.
That's
You
all
think
I'm gonna
so?
say. Oh yeah, Graham Gano is. I've had this conversation with my co-host. Lawrence Tynes kicked the Giants to 2 Super Bowls, and
Mhm.
grateful for that. But Graham Gano might be the greatest kicker in Giants history.
I
I
mean,
mean,
his resume is probably better than any kicker in Giants history, but that includes non-Giants years.
through his first, he's been with the Giants for 3 years,
Yeah,
and he's kicked more, or he's made more, field goals from 50 plus yards than any kicker in Giants history did when in a Giant uniform.
Jesus, goodness,
Yeah,
goodness,
he's Graham
that's good.
Gano is he's the GOAT Giants kicker. That's what my co-host says, and now I'm fully on board with that take too.
Hey, is your punter Scottish? I'm trying to remember if this
Yeah,
is the Scottish hammer.
Scottish
Okay,
Hammer.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I
He's
remember him like floating around Cleveland too. Okay.
yeah. Well, I want to ask you your special teams. I know you told me they're struggling. Giants special team is struggling too. Is this going to be a case where it's like the special team, the unit that has the better game could give their team a better chance to win? Giants
Here's
special team is atrocious. It's bad.
Here's
Outside
the
of Graham
thing, though.
Gano.
Before this game against the Colts, the Vikings were top 3 in expected points scored from their special teams. I talked a lot about the stuff that bothered me about the special teams. Obviously, they gave up that blocked punt. Obviously, they've had some issues, but Ryan Wright is a top 5 punter right now. He's actually doing a really good job as a punter. The punt kickoff coverage is really good. The kickoff coverage is incredible. The special teams unit, I think, is net good, and a lot of people at the beginning of the season were talking about how important the special teams coordinator Matt Daniels was. There are just some players that have had some specific problems. Greg Joseph, as the kicker, had some problems, especially the front half of the year. It's gotten a little bit better. He's been making his kicks. Jalen Reagor is statistically a pretty decent punt returner, but every Vikings fan who's been watching it gets really uncomfortable every time he's back there because he has muffed putts, fumble putts. It just hasn't hurt the Vikings yet. So there's 2 or 3 players that are really kind of a concern from a special teams perspective. But actually, the special teams have been a strength of the unit. They just had some issues against the Colts in ways that are probably not repeatable, right? Like a blocked punt is just what it is, right? And Reagor would have had a 51-yard punt return were it not for a phantom face mask call. On Chris Boyd, who is the Vikings nominee for the Pro Bowl special teamer. I think he made a second or third alternate as a special teamer, and he deserves it. I mean, the Vikings special teams unit is actually pretty good. It just has 2 or 3 areas where you've got a lot of concerns. So that's so if the Giants is bad all around, the Vikings will probably be able to take advantage of it, put them in bad field position spots. I mean, Ryan Wright is playing really well as a punter, and the kickoff coverage is fantastic.
Typically, your punt coverage is all about the depth that you have on your roster, right? If you have good
Depth
depth,
and coaching.
yeah, depth and coaching. But when you have good depth, typically that means your punt your special team is going to be good. I'll say this about Jamie Gillan: he's a social media punter.
So you're saying he's got the big highlight punts, but he doesn't do it from punt to punt.
Exactly. And he's got the hair, and he's Scottish, and
The
the
Browns got rid of him for a reason.
Exactly.
I'm aware.
And the coverages, they don't have depth. They lack depth all around. So their
Those gunners are not getting it done.
No,
that makes
it's
sense.
not. It's not.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they make those key mistakes in key moments. Like against Washington, final drive. After they go up 20-12, they kick the ball off, and then the Washington's able to return it to the 40-yard line. So it's like in those key moments where you're like, you can't make a special team mistake. Here's a Richie James fumble. Here's terrible punt coverage. The only good thing I can say about the Giants special teams is their kicker is really, really good.
All right. Well, do you have a score prediction before we get you out?
I think it's going to be low scoring. I think the Giants actually do a good job of not allowing Justin Jefferson to take over the game. But I do think he'll have his numbers. And I think the Vikings win 21-18. I think I won't be surprised if it's a late, fourth quarter game-winning drive by Kirk Cousins to win the game. But it's a big game for the Giants because they have the opportunity to clinch a playoff spot. But I just think that, look, coaching only gets you so far. At some point, you need talent, and this is one of those games where the talent discrepancy is going to show a lot for the Giants.
Fair enough. On your podcast, I had predicted that they would go. It would be like 31-28 or something like that. So
something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So I've predicted a bit of a higher scoring game than you did. Not a huge issue, obviously. It'll be kind of fun to see how it plays out. Where can people find you?
You can follow me, NYG Daily. I have a podcast, NYG Weekly. If you're a Viking fan, I recorded a great episode with Arif on our podcast. We talked a lot about the Vikings. Two teams that they might see each other again in the playoffs. So we might be doing this again, right?
Oh yeah, they very well could, and we very well will if that happens. Yeah, so, for sure.
It's been a fun season. It's been fun for you, fun for me, a lot of excitement. So looking forward to Saturday.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
All right, let's go to the mailbag, and the first question is from Damian Barrett. If we beat the Giants, we reclaim our linear Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. With the Packers scheduled for Week 17, we're left with a unique scenario. A win keeps us as holders, but a loss will see it literally become their Super Bowl. How can we make the players aware to avoid this rift in the space-time continuum?
Okay, so in order to kind of tease this out, we have to understand that a Packers win does not create a new Super Bowl, right? Because the thing is that it's Vikings fans' Super Bowl to beat the Packers, right? So there's only one trophy transferred to the Packers in the event that they win. But if the Vikings win, they get two trophies. That's just how it works. Or they get to keep one and they materialize the other. So that I think that's kind of normal. I think the problem is there's probably some rule where if the Packers get the trophy that's created as a product of their antipathy for regular season wins, it feels like that trophy should just disappear, right? Like they logically cannot own the trophy that was created to mock the existence of that trophy, right? Like that makes sense. It's like an antimatter matter thing, right?
I like to think that it just melds into the Super Bowl, like the two pieces are broken, and then you put them together, and you see the bright light forming them in between, so it melts it together.
But that's what happened when the Giants beat the Washington Commanders.
No, they took their half. It's right.
It's like in Legends of the Hidden Temple when you get the other half metal and that gives you the full life.
Yeah, and then you got the guy trying to chase you out of the room and try to get you. Yeah.
Yeah, a totally normal situation that everyone's experienced, and then you have to give up the metal. But that's a whole new life, and then maybe you can get an all expenses paid cruise. I think the logical outcome of that.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if that was the trophy, or if that was the thing you won at the end, or if it was I
feel like it was different every show. I remember as a kid watching, thinking it was different every show, and be like, hey, so if it's different every show, some of these are worse than others, right? And so if you go through all of the effort and you get the worst one the show has ever produced,
yeah,
you feel kind of screwed, right?
Basically, yeah. As for how to tell them, I mean,
I don't know. I feel like first of all, there is the possibility that the trophy disappears into the ether if the Packers possess it, because it's a logical impossibility for them to earn a trophy that exists only because they have such disdain for the existence of the game. But the second is, I don't think that the players can or should be made aware of it, right? It's like traveling back in time and meeting yourself. It creates its own paradox.
Yeah, absolutely. This is this is Back to the Future Part 2 all over again.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't tell the players.
No, absolutely not. Let's go to Devin, who asks, CJ Ham has a rushing touchdown in 2 games this season, the Bills and the Colts games. Can you please explain the correlation between Ham touchdowns and the Vikings playing in absolutely crazy games? Just as a side note, I was wrong about the number of CJ Ham touchdowns because I was counting rushing touchdowns last episode instead of...
Oh, you fool.
You fool! Also including receiving. Because I was thinking that he had more than... There's no way he only had 3. Yeah, he has 2 receiving touchdowns, one in 2020 and one in 2019. So
by land or by air,
right? Captain Ham is your man that you want out there. So he's got 5 touchdowns in his career total. So
it's pretty good.
That said, what can we glean from this exactly?
Well, I mean, the Bills and the Colts games are crazy games precisely because improbable stuff happened. The thing is, in the Bills game, the improbable stuff happened in favor of the Vikings. In the Colts game, it happened in favor of the Colts. So I can't really figure out kind of what produces the voodoo magic. Maybe it is just a chaos element, right? Maybe a ham touchdown is not designed to produce vibes for one team or the other, but is meant to just throw a wrench into your plans. I think that's probably more likely.
That's entirely possible. It is just an odd coincidence that I truly enjoy. I started to try to look up when he scored his touchdown in 2019, and boy, that's just not happening. I want to say I want to say I'm good enough to like figure this out, but I'm really just not. we're not going to go that much in depth here, I don't think. Although it looks like I found the 2019 one. I'm not going to find the 2020. 2019 was a win against Detroit at Detroit that was 42-30. That's not a crazy game. That's not something that's super exciting. That's not biggest comeback in NFL history sort of thing. So
right.
Nope. We instead shall move on to Trill Swaggets, who asks, for the alchemy corner, careful. The pictures of Kirk sipping from a Gatorade cup prior to mounting multiple comebacks have made me suspicious. Is there a Skyrim-style potion or elixir in those cups? If so, what trait is it targeting? Archery, light armor, pickpocketing, etc.? Disclaimer, this is a video game question, and any inference of this being a magic question is based on the perspective of the reader and not the intention of the author of the tweet.
Is that so? Is Trill Swaggets that clever? Is that what's happening here? We're going to get bamboozled by the fact that one thing can be multiple things?
Things can be two things.
It's okay. Skyrim style potion. It's Gatorade. I gotta bring it to you, man. He's always drinking Gatorade. That's just the thing that happens. This is like from like Space Jam, Mike's Magic Juice or whatever, or was it Magic Stuff?
I will tell you a secret. I have never watched Space Jam.
I mean, you've got kids. What are you talking about?
That's not a. Yeah, I have a son, yes, but I'm never watching the new one. And even though I was the right age for it, I never sat down and watched the original.
Michael's Secret Stuff. Okay. So it's basically this, is that Kirk has been drinking Tom Brady's secret stuff, right? And Tom Brady has been monstered out of his energy, and now it's Kirk with like kind of pedestrian during game performances and crazy end of game performances. Maybe that's where we're at. Yeah. So it's less Skyrim and more Space Jam.
Well, at least it's not magical.
Yeah, Ojibwe, I mean, that would be ridiculous. This is alien technology. That's not magic. That's sci-fi.
Exactly. Ojibwe Pun asks, what are the remaining unsustainable ways for the Vikings to win?
There's so many, right? You could have a kick six, right? Like the Auburn game against Alabama in the Iron Bowl. That would be, I think, phenomenal to watch a kick six. I think the last time it happened in the NFL was like Antonio Cromartie. That one wasn't against the Vikings, right? His return against the Vikings was an interception return. So there's that. I think that's on there. I think an onside kick, right? Like needing an onside kick to recover and score. That would be one. An ill-advised lateral from the opposing team.
Boy,
would be the one.
Twice in the span of a week would be impressive. I will say that.
And they didn't even occur like in a similar time slot. One occurred the day after the other, and it's like, buddy, there's no way you didn't hear about this game.
Yeah, of all ways for you to end a game, boy, that really does take all of the potential idiocy out. Like, I don't even know how you. It was amazing to watch, and what was the? There's so many great terms for it. The hail moron is my favorite.
That one's good. That one's good.
Yeah. As far as remaining unsustainable ways,
there's so many, right? You could have a fumble Ruski. You can
penalty that means that you get a free play to, with an untimed down.
Oh, that's good. I like that one, especially if the penalty does not affect the outcome of the play.
Yep.
Right. Like if it's a holding penalty away from the offensive line or the intended receiver, and it just gives you a free play for no reason, and then you could say, hey, they weren't going to win this game if it wasn't for this penalty that had no impact on the play.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. Yeah.
We almost had the untimed down at the end of overtime.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
We nearly had that. Listening to the Colts announcers. I forget which one of them said it, but one of them said, and your defensive coordinator tells you this is what you should do, but you gotta be a little bit sneakier than that to do it.
Brutal.
It's like, you know what? He's right. Also, boy. Let's go to the Mond Pond, who asks, if Kirk wears white cleats for this whiteout game and Ed Ingram trips him again, do you think it'll have a do the right thing level argument that would break out? Wow.
That is such a good pull.
Wow.
No way would Kirk make a do the right thing reference.
No.
Under no circumstances.
No.
Yeah.
Plus, they tend to keep the trash bins away from
that's right.
Away from the actual field of play. Minnesota sports fan asks, what positions do you see the Vikings targeting in the draft next year? I see, in order of importance, D-line, linebacker, wide receiver 2, and guard center, especially if Bradbury is done. I think Kirk's play has averted any possibility of a quarterback like Anthony Richardson.
Certainly not in the first round. I don't see a quarterback. I mean, 2 reasons. One, it seems unlikely to me that there'd be a first round quarterback that late, given how the board's fallen so far. But 2, I mean, it's first round quarterback. Probably doesn't make sense anyway. That said, Kirk has only got 1 more year left on the contract. It could be like an Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love deal or a Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers deal. Maybe it's complimenting Kirk too much to make but you get the idea, right? Is that, you could still have a quarterback you like and draft a first round guy. But I do think that is all unlikely. I think that the one missing here is actually cornerback. I think, first of all, you don't have a ton of cornerbacks left under contract after this year. So it's just it's the ones that you drafted, Andrew Booth and Caleb Evans, and Cameron Dantzler, and that's you have to re-sign Chris Boyd. You don't have Duke Shelley because he's a 1-year guy, obviously based off of his contract. Patrick Peterson's 1 year, so I think it makes a ton of sense to get a cornerback. I know that the Vikings just drafted 2 corners, but there's no way you come out of this season thinking, yeah, I'm comfortable with that, especially if Patrick Peterson's gone.
Yeah. So
I think that you go with a cornerback there. And Shannon Sullivan's gone too, who now he's tough to talk about.
Let's go to Connor, who asks, first off, did Arif shovel for any of his neighbors today?
I'm in Vermont.
So absolutely not.
No, I can't. I can pay a friend to do that, but I can't do it.
Question, because this is the sort of thing our Discord would want to know. Are you able to get bougie cookies delivered to you at your current location?
Okay, well, first of all, hold on. The cookies that are part of the delivery service that exists for everybody, by the way, in Minneapolis, they're not bougie cookies. They're just cookies. That's all they are. They're not the price of the cookies themselves is not particularly high, especially when you account for the fact that they're often individually sold. You get discounts on 6-packs and 12-packs. They're marketed to college students, so it's not they're not bougie prices. Second, I repeat myself, but I am in Burlington, Vermont. Any cookie I get here will be a bougie cookie. Can't get around that one.
You're really committing to this. You've since gone on the record about crumble cookies in the Twin Cities. Did you see that they're receiving fines for violating child labor laws?
Sorry, hold on. Why did I talk about crumble cookies? What's going on there?
You were discussing the different cookies you could get for delivery, and you were choosing Insomnia for one reason, but crumble was also something
crumble came up.
Yes.
Okay, and So I chose the one that was not under investigation for labor violations.
You did, yes, but you were also discussing.
So that makes me the bougie for picking the one that doesn't have any. Okay,
You're jumping to a conclusion. I was merely reporting something based on something you had said previously. James, as the historian of this show, based on the fact that I have to sift through the entirety of the year for the Christmas episode, let me tell you what you said.
What did I say about crumble cookies, James?
You endorsed them, and I believe you said you endorsed their labor practices. I'll have to check that.
Okay, I don't believe you. This is slander. And no matter what I say to defend myself, the Discord server is going to turn against me anyway.
I believe it was episode 440, but I'd have to triple check that. I don't know that for certain. So
There's no way I said I endorsed their labor practices out loud.
Sorry, you said the loud part soft. My bad.
Okay, have you been to the Crumble Cookie website, by the way?
I have not.
It's extremely tempting.
Wait, which part?
Okay, they don't show they're violating labor laws on the website. They're trying to sell cookies, man. They got some guy wearing like Santa gloves breaking apart these cookies, and it should not be as like incredible looking as it is, but it is especially like the chocolate with the marshmallow. Man, I'm glad that they don't have any chain stores in Burlington.
Looking at the Santa, does he look inviting? Does he look like he's trying to convince
you can only see his
not
hands.
To eat, but instead to like join and help make the cookies?
Okay, well, first of all, if we're talking about like the specter of poor labor practices, Santa is very appropriate for this discussion. But unless we are under agreement that the elves are unionized, which I imagine we're not, I don't think that's part of the traditional Santa lore. But no, you can only see the gloves. You can't see the rest of Santa. So he's just breaking apart these cookies in front of the camera. But they are good looking cookies.
All right,
this is rough.
Let's get away from this corner as quickly as we can. And go to Beef Brewski, who asks, are teams being more patient with rookie quarterbacks? Maybe it's recency bias, but it feels like young quarterbacks are given more time to develop into competent starters than ever before. Example, Lawrence, Fields, Jones, Hurts, Allen, and Murray. It also seems to be paying off. What's changed?
I mean, I feel like it's only a lot of time compared to 5-6 years ago, because we're pretty used to giving quarterbacks a long lead time before then, and there was just this period of time where they didn't. And I don't know if that's just like knowing, right? It's just knowing that Josh Rosen isn't going to turn out and just like dumping him, right? It's just knowing that some of these guys after 1 or 2 years is just not going to turn out. And there's like ways you can know, right? Like if they're just so catastrophically bad that there's not really a ton of, and I don't mean bad as in their play on the field, right? If it was, then Josh Allen, his rookie year would have just been out, but rather catastrophically bad in all the processes in like practice, the way they approach film, the way they can, if they can't identify a defense in practice, then after year 1, then yeah, it probably makes sense to kind of move on from him. Right. So I think that we just had a batch of quarterbacks where it made sense to move on pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, what was that like 20? I mean, because the Vikings stayed with Christian Ponder until year 3. So 2015 to 2018, that's a pretty small span of time. Maybe 2014, I don't know.
It was pretty high. It was pretty high turnover at that particular moment. Yeah.
Yeah, but like the only quarterback that was drafted in the first round before then that I can remember being turned over really quickly is like EJ Manuel, right? And like, okay, like good work. You did the right thing there, Bills.
Might have been something to that, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know that that's actually new, because some of these quarterbacks you're describing hit big in year 3. Hurts, for example, although he was kind of helped by the fact that Carson Wentz kind of cratered. So him being able to see the field year 1 was kind of a unique circumstance. But Hurts, Allen, both year 3 guys. See, who else did you list? You list Lawrence. Lawrence is a year 2 guy. Fields is a year 2 guy. So they don't even, I think, even count. Daniel Jones is a year 4 guy. That one's interesting, but I think the Giants just didn't have another option there. I don't think that was entirely because they were like committed to letting Daniel Jones play out his contract. I mean, they declined his 5th-year option, right? They kind of had to make a decision on him anyway, but the new coaching staff just kind of had their hands tied in terms of the ways that they could approach the quarterback position. So I wouldn't count that. Kyler Murray, I mean, he got a new contract. I think they believed in him. I don't think that was like we'll see if this works out. I mean, they gave him a new contract. So I don't think that there's any huge change here. I just think that the real change is seeing guys that are so catastrophically bad as on-field products day one, that they turn into something by year 3. That's interesting, right? And so Josh Allen is obviously a good example of that. I wouldn't say that Jalen Hurts was catastrophically bad, but he wasn't an NFL quarterback his rookie year, and now he's playing really, really well. I mean, if you remember the episode I had with Ben in week 2 heading into the Eagles game, I was just like, I don't look why does everyone assume that he's going to be good? He hasn't been good. And Ben totally agreed. He hadn't been good. And now he's an MVP candidate, right? So it's just kind of like we're seeing kind of these spikes in play. I don't think we're seeing any increase in patience, right? The Jets moved on from Sam Darnold really quickly, which that might be a mistake given how he's kind of playing all right for Carolina, right? The Jets also seemingly have moved on from Zach Wilson hyper fast, right? So I don't know that they're holding on to rookies longer, right? I just think that some of the ones that have turned out, it really feels like teams stuck with them for a long time, but there was likely something in the background that told you that was going to be a good idea, even if it wasn't an on-field result.
Boy, Zach Wilson just has the look of somebody who's going to tear it up in the USFL.
Yeah, or, JV high school.
Yeah, I mean, one or the other.
Right.
Bowl Sharif Floyd asks,
God,
for Arif's Pro Bowl selection corner, and no, I'm not using your pun in there. It doesn't work. How does it work when a player is selected to the Pro Bowl that has played for 2 different teams in that particular season, i.e. the case of TJ Hawkinson? Was TJ selected as a Pro Bowler because he played well as a Lion or because he was performing at a relatively high level as a Viking? Is it both? Will TJ represent both the Vikings and the Lions at the Pro Bowl? Has this happened before?
It's happened a couple of times. As I recall, it was the team that they finished the season with, that they ended up being the Pro Bowl representative for. It's not like it doesn't happen all the time because a midseason trade usually does not occur with a Pro Bowl quality player. But yeah, it has happened before. And it's not they just go with the team that are, most recently on.
Yeah. Also, for Arif and James's gift-giving corner, this is more of a statement, but I want to say that I am sorry for the abuse that James and Arif have had to endure these past couple of weeks. Evidently, the Norris Code listeners who are buying their partners inadequate gifts, i.e. the guy who bought his pregnant wife a Peloton, are engaging in a form of weaponized incompetence and,
That's
in
correct.
turn, are gaslighting Arif and James in hopes of making the two of them believe that it is their fault that their listeners are inept gift givers, when in reality...
This is the best question we've ever received.
It is entirely the listener's fault.
Yes.
So, my question for Arif and James is, are you okay? If not, through the help of your dear friend Luke Braun, the two of you can use the code LOCKEDON for 15% off your first visit with a therapist through BetterHelp.com.
This is the worst question we've ever received.
Boy, had you in the first half.
Oh, geez. By the way, because I'm never going to get sponsored by BetterHelp, there's some pretty good articles about how awful BetterHelp is that just got pushed onto, into the media cycle. So, maybe Luke Braun is not exactly helping you. I'm just saying. Just putting that out there.
Boy,
Look, I'm just read the reviews. Just before you purchase any product, whether or not endorsed by me or one of my enemies, read the reviews. And if you Google BetterHelp, let's see what happens if you Google BetterHelp. You'll probably get a sponsored result at the top for BetterHelp, and then their competitors, and then news. Oh man. Oh no. This is not good. Oh, this is bad. All right. Well, I'll let you all go to news.google.com and Google BetterHelp.
Let's go to Jonathan, who asks,
Moving on.
how long would it take Admiral Thrawn to build a completely unbeatable football dynasty if he were given the reins of an organization as GM or head coach? This is assuming he had the motivation to do so, of course. Say, for example, he became stranded on Earth with no way to get back to the Chiss Ascendancy. Ascendancy? Sure.
Ascendancy, yeah.
Until he won the Super Bowl 10 times.
I wasn't going to correct you because correcting you would be 10 times nerdier.
Yeah, well,
but then you asked, so I had to.
Yes.
Okay, so last episode I brought up Jonathan as somebody who was like, "Hey, I wasn't all that impressed with Kirk's level of play," and I was like, I think it was Jonathan or Jonathan NFL. His avatar was a Chiss Admiral in the Star Wars series, and I couldn't remember the name of the admiral. It's Admiral Thrawn. And the whole thing with Admiral Thrawn, who is one of the most well-liked characters in the Star Wars expanded universe, so well liked that when they wiped the canon, when Disney took like all of the Star Wars and said all those books gone, don't mean a thing, none of that's real. The only thing that's real is Clone Wars for some reason, and now our new show Rebels. And Thrawn is in Rebels, so they brought him back, but with no backstory. And then they had a Thrawn book. I think they're gonna make a Thrawn show. So he's a really well loved character, and his whole thing is that. I think the TV Tropes article is called the Xanatos Gambit or something. His whole thing is that he is so great at like crafting like tactics and strategies that he's virtually unbeatable. And he's an antagonist in the series, but the way it's written, one of the only good writers in the Star Wars expanded. I mean, the books are just generally awful, but one of the only good writers. Oh crap! I forgot his name. Wrote the Thrawn trilogy and wrote a lot of it from Thrawn's perspective, and so he became a character that was actually easy to cheer for, even though you knew that he should lose, and you cheer for eventually him losing, so that the heroes would win. But he was like this genius tactician, and so with that in mind,
I hate that I know that's Timothy Zahn.
It's Timothy Zahn, because I was like, Drew Karpyshyn is like the other good author. I know he didn't write it. He did the Mass Effect series, but he also wrote like the Bane duology. Yeah, wow, very nerdy of you to know that, James. I can't believe you. What a nerd! I'm glad I'm not a nerd like you.
We've discussed that I read a number of the Star Wars books when I was a kid. So
okay, yeah. But do you agree with my assessment that was actually like a pretty good series right there?
No, that was fine. Like that was good. I enjoyed that. There are, however, books that made me stop reading them altogether, like The New Rebellion and a couple others, where I was just like, no, I'm done.
Totally fair. This is just there's not that many mailbag questions left, so I'll just go off on more tangents. But the thing that stopped me was whatever book has like the Sun Crusher or whatever in it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Kind of. I'm trying to remember. That might have been before, or that might have been after I quit.
Fair enough. So like they go to the installation, which is like in between 4 black holes. It just gets way out of hand. Everyone's jumping sharks. But there's the installation where the Death Stars were built. They go to the installation and they find the next super weapon, which is like, so everyone who complains about the sequel trilogy, reusing the super weapon trope, first of all, you're right to complain. That's very boring and annoying. But also, they weren't the first. The book series went back into that well a ton of times. It's one of the reasons I like the Thrawn trilogy. In retrospect, they don't do that. It's a character you have to work with.
Is that the Jedi Academy trilogy?
It must be. I think you're right. Yeah.
No, I avoided that one.
Awful. Yeah, good move. Awful. It's awful stuff. And the next super weapon is this ship, like the size, like it's a little bit bigger than like an X-wing or something, but its like armor is like literally impenetrable. Like you just can't, it's cannon, you can't blow it up. Sorry. And it has like 4 turrets on it, so it can fight starfighters, but it doesn't need to. It can just run into them. And eventually, the author of the book realizes, why should it have guns if it can just run through every ship? And it does that. But that's not even the super weapon part of it. The super weapon is that it has a bunch of missiles that can destroy suns. It's called a Sun Crusher, and it destroys entire solar systems. And it's like, I finished the book, and I'm like, why am I reading this? This is dumb. I'm done with Star Wars, and I never read another expanded universe again. I ended up picking up the new series, the new canon with Aftermath, and Aftermath was such like a boring book that I was just like, all right, I'm done with Star Wars books forever. Anyway, Thrawn would take probably 2 years. His whole deal is that he would be Belichick to the nth degree, but not even like current Belichick, but like the myth of Belichick would be what Thrawn is. Is the idea. So yeah, it would take him 2 years. He'd have a 10-year dynasty, and then probably what was the scenario? The Chiss ascendancy would pick him back up from Earth. This is like a bad fan fiction.
And Arif knows,
that's what the expanded universe was anyway.
Yeah,
so.
and Arif knows something about bad fan fiction. So
okay, look, no, the different episode. We're not talking about that here.
Yeah. Mayo Coffee asks, is Arif worried that the Vikings choosing white jerseys and a white end zone for Saturday's game eerily coincides with Luke's rise to leadership among the Norse Code white movement? Will the outcome of the game dictate the success of Chairman Arif's revolution?
Oh my God.
Also, we were talking about this before the show. Weiss as the guest.
No. Okay. Look. So if you go to translate.google.com, Weiss translates to white, but I knew that wasn't correct because I knew it was a double S that translates to white. James and I both took German in high school, which obviously makes us experts on the language. And I knew it was the double S or the thing that looks like a B, which is also a double S.
The schwa?
Yeah, sure. The schwa? That's what translates to white, but Weiss with one S, it doesn't, like, I went to a German English dictionary and it just like doesn't exist. There's Weisse, which has an E at the end, and there's Weissen, which is a verb, but it doesn't conjugate in any of its conjugations to Weiss because they change the I and the E around in some of these conjugations, in the dative case, for example. So none of these, it's actually a really irregular verb, none of these are a word. This is not a word in German. So there's too many white movement coincidences already with Luke. We don't need to add another one.
Sure. Nolan Kaler asks, for James's music corner, I'm assuming that you haven't stopped practicing the piano. When will you regale us with your favorite Christmas carol, or perhaps something by Rimsky-Korsakov, Shostakovich, sure, or Prokofiev, to satiate the taste of the Bolsheviks.
So James has been learning piano for about a year, so I'm going to guess he's only 3 months away from learning all of these composers. He's got to be close.
I mean, yes, my Greensleeves is outstanding. If we're doing Christmas carols, my Greensleeves works. I do have Jingle Bells down pretty well. I don't think I know any other Christmas music from my book, but hope springs eternal that by this time next year I'll be able to aid in the revolution in musically in the only way that I can.
It's important.
Bob the Bolsharif asks, for James's law-breaking corner, at the end of the last episode, Arif encouraged his listeners to make Molotov cocktails to throw at the Pelotons they bought their wives for Christmas. Now, the National Firearms Act of 1936 and subsequent case law defines the unlicensed manufacture of Molotov cocktail as creating an illegal destructive device and therefore a federal felony, whether or not it is used in the commission of a crime. See United States v. Simmons, number 95-5460 in the year of 1996. What federal felony is Arif going to encourage his listeners to commit next?
Okay, first of all, I looked this up, and you're wrong. The law is not the National Firearms Act of 1936. It's the National Firearms Act of 1934. Some lawyer you are. Second, the U.S. v. Simmons is not the only subsequent case law that defines the Molotov cocktail as a destructive device under the National Firearms Act of 19. There has been additional case law beyond that I believe at least 2 more cases that have defined it as a destructive device. But I will say this: the possession of the Molotov cocktail is only illegal because you have not registered it with the federal government for taxation purposes. So, recommending that people produce Molotov cocktails is in and of itself not illegal. It is only illegal if you are prevented from registering it with the federal government. I am fine here. What federal felony is Reef going to encourage his listeners to commit next? None. I have never encouraged my listeners to commit a felony. Probably.
Without wearing a Luke Braun mask at least.
Oh yeah, but I mean, I would never wear, aside from a gag in a podcast, I would never wear a Luke Braun mask, especially not in the Commission of Crimes.
I was actually watching that earlier today for some reason. Like I wanted to see his reaction to it again, and it was still just as sweet.
Beautiful. It was beautiful.
Anya Taylor Joy asks, for a Reefs comedy corner, in the past you have rightfully praised Brandon Lee Mulligan. Based on that appreciation, are you a Dungeons and Dragons guy?
Okay, first of all, this question is entrapment. Second, so people unfamiliar, Brendan Lee Mulligan was one of the writers on College Humor. College Humor ended up going into bankruptcy or something. I don't know. Something happened. They ended College Humor. The people who were in College Humor, one of them, Sam Reich, bought out all of the IP for College Humor, created Dropout.tv. And so the College Humor brand continues under Dropout. Brendan Lee Mulligan has become the Dungeon Master. I can't avoid that word, I guess. For their premiere series, which just Dimension 20, just a series of role-playing games. I shouldn't say the Dungeon Master, because they have a bunch of different seasons and a bunch of different games. He is the primary Dungeon Master for most of those seasons. He is a genius. He's a comedic genius. He's brilliant. He's also just smart in a bunch of other ways, too. And also he knows a lot of bird facts, which I learned recently. Anyway, I showed my brother here, Rashad, Fantasy High. It's the first one that a lot of people watch. You don't have to watch any of them in any particular order. If you want to watch The Unsleeping City, which is a high fantasy that takes place in New York, you can watch that. If you want to watch Mischief and Magic or whatever, it's the one that absolutely roasts the Harry Potter universe. It's incredible. It's only 4 episodes. I recommend that. You don't have to watch the other ones to watch, one to get the context. But Fantasy High is the first one. It's the first one a lot of people watch. And Urshad was... James, you know how loud Urshad... Like, I have a loud laugh. Urshad has like a Titanic boom of a laugh.
Yes, he absolutely does.
Yeah, and so like there's like buildings next door that could hear him, I'm sure. With how much he was laughing at this. So I'll say I'll recommend Dimension 20 to people who do or do not enjoy role-playing content. It's just really good stuff. Rashad doesn't like listening to other people roleplay. He doesn't like Critical Role or anything like that, and he really much enjoyed Dimension 20. With that said, am I a Dungeons & Dragons guy? Again, I refuse to answer that question.
Let's go to Jack Rackham, who asks, for a Reefs relationship corner, my wife rearranged her work schedule and left for family Christmas 2 days early. Mm-hmm. I wasn't pleased as I still had to go to work and couldn't see my daughter for those days. This makes going to Saturday's game fair game for me, correct?
I actually don't see why I wouldn't. Yeah, absolutely. If there's some like weird thing I'm missing here, I don't know. But it like if this happened with like me and Chelsea, she would be flabbergasted that I wouldn't go to like the game or something or whatever I wanted to do on Saturday without her. Like she's like, well, I'm not there. Why would you? Wait, I can't. I can't hold you to that. Just go. So I might not have the correct context to see why this would be incorrect because the nature of my relationship would just be like she'd be just more confused if anything if I didn't go. But yeah, I mean that. She left early. What fidelity do you have to not go to this game?
Yeah. If anything, you should just take a bunch of pictures and like show her how much fun you're having. She likes, she married you because of how fun you were and how much she loves you and how much she likes to see you happy. And this is something that would bring happiness,
presumably,
right?
We presume all of these things.
Yeah, she's not trying to like steal your voice, all the Little Mermaid or something. So
right, yeah, no, see, yeah, a normal marriage.
Yeah, exactly. No one's stealing anyone's voice here. Don from Ohio asks, outside of Arif, who will be the first person Elon Musk blocks from Vikings Twitter?
Man, so the first 2 options that popped in my head, I'm absolutely not going to say. They will remain a mystery forever. Unfortunately, because Elon Musk is a villain, he will not be blocking Luke Braun. It would be funny if he blocked Luke Inman from Twitter again, just because like Inman was just like locked out of Twitter for like a year and a half for no well-defined reason. So that'd be funny. Who else? Like, the thing is, I become like more and more disconnected from like who's actually in Vikings Twitter. So like sometimes I'll just like wade into a discussion and I'll just like click through the replies and stuff like that, and I like everyone else is clearly familiar with like half the people in the thread, and they're calling each other by like their first names, which is neither in their handle nor in their at. And I'm just like, oh, okay, you all know each other. I've got no idea what's going on here. It sounds like Brent. Yeah, it sounds like you're right. Cool. How does everyone know that he's Brent? So I am totally lost in Vikings Twitter. But I'm going to take a stab and say it's one of the tone setters. That makes the most sense to me.
I was going to say it's probably going to be Bob Netherlands or whichever account used to go on and post the fake news.
Oh, Rasta. Yeah, that one makes sense too.
Yep, I think Rasta ends up accidentally tweeting something that's accurate, and as a result, ends up getting banned.
Oh, that'd be perfect. Yeah.
Let's go to Logan Bolsharif, who asks, question for Reef and James's Christmas Corner. Last week, I asked about how to remedy things with my wife after getting her a Peloton. Obviously, I was joking because I'm not actually a terrible husband/gift giver.
Yeah, sure, obviously. Yeah, I was definitely joking.
However, today, my wife received an advert from Peloton. I can only assume you did this in an act of sabotage in my home life due to my work in the Bolsharif movement. What gives? Why? I assure you, I will have my revenge for this.
I still don't have a handle on the Bolsharif movement. Is it antagonistic to me? Because it also seems to be like the fan base for the podcast. Like, what's happening here?
As far as I can tell, they're both antagonistic and glorifying you based on the art that is being posted in the Discord.
Okay. Oh God, the art! Oh my God! Someone was like, "Hey, I can't believe Arif hasn't made this one of these his Twitter profiles." It's like you can't. That's hard to believe.
that's what Getter. That was your plan. Like it's that sort of thing. Like
yeah, exactly. Like, no, although there's one where I'm photo. Okay, so I don't know if this is the original or not, because I'm so online poisoned that if there's an original piece of Soviet artwork this is supposed to be, I don't know. I'm only familiar with the one that is the Twitch streamer Hassan Piker, and my face is photoshopped onto that one. Whether or not it's the original or the one that has been turned into a meme for Hassan. Very weird to say his name aloud and not refer to my last name. I hate it. Also, he goes trending on Twitter every so often, and people are like, "Hey, Arif, Hassan is trending." It's one of the most common names in the world, man. But I know exactly who this is about, and it's not me. Very annoying. He seems like a cool guy, but change your name. But yeah, I that does seem funny enough that maybe I'll change my profile picture to that one. We'll see.
So he did post the Peloton ad that was sent to his home. And
okay, so this is so obviously the official stance of the podcast is that we don't believe in karma, but we do believe in vibes. Momentum doesn't exist. Karma doesn't exist.
I mean, you believe in vibes. I've got their payment, or I've got some payment information due to Patreon and a potential address for most of these guys. I can send out a Peloton ad if I want. Not that I did.
Okay. I would play cover for that by calling it vibes.
Oh, that's a lie.
What I'm trying to yeah, I'm trying to get this across. So yeah, momentum doesn't exist, karma doesn't exist, vibes exist. And you put out some bad vibes with your question, which is now bearing false witness. No, that's a religious term. Can't use that.
Boy.
Lying. Well, why did I just say that? It's just lying. And because it was written down and submitted to us, and now that we're lawyers because we cited the National Firearms Act of 1934, that's how it works. We both passed the bar now. That's perjury. That's also how perjury works. When you lie to a lawyer, that's definitely perjury. Don't look that up.
You know what? We're ending here. My drink's almost empty, so we're gonna end. And Arif, what do you have to plug?
So I've got some discussion on the MVP race coming up at ProFootballNetwork.com. You can follow my work ProFootballNetwork.com/author/ahassan. I've also got obviously some reviews of previous games, some discussion about kind of the direction it looks like the Lions are taking, as well as positional power rankings. I got wide receiver, cornerback done. I'm going to get linebacker and safety done. I also did quarterback, I guess, a while back too. So quarterback, cornerback, wide receiver, linebacker, and safety.
Well, that's going to be the end of this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We will be off on Monday. We're going to be taking the day off, but posting the Christmas episode. So hope you enjoy the outtakes and all of that. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that this is not sustainable. And we'll be back later the next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.